We knew Ubisoft's Star Wars Outlaws had abysmal sales given the fact that they reduced their Q2 net bookings by 30%. But now we have an actual number that reveals just how much the game has sold in about a month since it hit the market. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Roll this up over at thatparkplace.com, and you are reading that headline correctly. A new rumor claims that the game has only sold 1 million copies to date. That is far less than analyst expectations of 5 million in the quarter, which ended today. This rumor comes from Grant Taylor Hill at Insider Gaming. He reports, "We have secured a current sales figure from sources close to the game. At the time of writing, Star Wars Outlaws has just ticked over 1 million sales worldwide." He goes on to note that Assassin's Creed Mirage reportedly sold 5 million copies after 3 months. So this game performing a lot worse than Assassin's Creed Mirage. Albeit Assassin's Creed Mirage had a longer time frame, 3 months there, where we're looking at Star Wars Outlaws released right August 30th. It's September 30th now, just about a month. Nevertheless, this is much worse than initial reports. If you recall, games industry writer Christopher Dring noted that according to the UK sales chart, the Star Wars Outlaws had done, quote, about half of Assassin's Creed Mirage. That no longer looks to be the case. It's looking like it only did about 20%. Obviously, again, Star Wars Outlaws still has maybe 2 months to kind of hit that 5 million mark or get more than that, but that is unlikely to happen. Most sales for games do indeed happen within the month or so after it releases. You can look at Black Myth Wukong, did what, like 10 million or whatever in 4 days, and I think with about a month it was at 18 million. So it definitely tapered off, but it was still obviously increasing those sales. But most of those sales were still done within that first month or so. And then obviously you will have stuff on the back end, but that happens over time. Maybe when you release a sequel or you release another game in the same franchise, etc. To kind of boost those sales on the back end. Obviously, you would also be able to boost sales based on having an actual sale, like offering it for 50% off or something like that. Or if your game happens to be really good, you have like a Game of the Year edition, etc. So those are all ways to like kind of increase your sales. But usually it happens within the first month or so that we see. And this is not good at all for Star Wars Outlaws. In fact, it is much lower than what Barclays' Nick Dempsey suggested that Ubisoft would sell, based on that 500 million euro that they had originally told investors would be how much they would bring in net bookings for the second quarter, the quarter that Star Wars Outlaws released in. Obviously, that quarter running from June to July through September. And he asked this in during Ubisoft's Q1 fiscal year 2024 sales report in May. During the conference call there, he asks, "When I look at the guidance for Q2, and if I assume something similar for back catalog in Q2 as Q1, kind of getting to 200 to 230 million euro, that sort of range, for the new release Star Wars Outlaws, when I look at the $70 price and then assuming what you might get from it, I'm getting to around 5 million units, something in that sort of bracket. First of all, where could I be going wrong with that thinking? Secondly, are you just being pretty conservative in your guidance? Because I guess given the interest in that game, we might have thought it would be more than 5 million units." So he was basically coming to the conclusion that this game would sell 5 million units in the quarter, and that would be on the conservative end, given how bullish Ubisoft had been with this game. Albeit we now know that their bullish nature was them just kind of ignoring all of the massive red flags that gamers were handing to them, saying, we don't like this. Why does this character design look like this? This is Star Wars. Star Wars isn't really that interesting anymore. Your game looks super buggy. What is going on? Why do you have KVS backhanding stormtroopers with an open fist while they're wearing a helmet? What are you doing? What were you thinking? What is happening here? And then how they were sending people to Disneyland, buttering them all up. They were clearly all trying to sell this game that looked like absolute crap. I mean, there were so many red flags, and those were just to name a few, and Ubisoft just completely ignored them. I mean, people were telling them that the graphics looked terrible. I think one of the investors actually brought that up in this call, the same call that Nick Dempsey was brought it up. It might have been Dempsey. I can't recall which one it was, but he was like, "Are you going to delay this game?" And Ubisoft was like, "No, we've gone gold." They weren't listening to any of this stuff. But as I said, this number isn't all that surprising because, again, we did get the recent Ubisoft press release where they did lower those net bookings for the second quarter down from 500 million to 350 to 370 million. That was a 30% decline. In fact, it lowered its entire yearly net bookings to, quote, around 1.95 billion euros and around break even non-IFRS operating income and free cash flow. So they don't even think that they are going to break even. They might barely break even for the entire year now. That's how bad the sales numbers were for Star Wars Outlaws. So we knew they were bad. We just now have confirmation based on this rumor. I guess it's not super confirmation, but I think it does add up. The company admitted that the cut was made as a, quote, reflection of decisions taken for Assassin's Creed Shadows and the softer than expected launch for Star Wars Outlaws. I'm assuming they're talking about the yearly cut for Assassin's Creed Shadows, given the fact that they did delay it to February, which is still within their fiscal year. That is at the end of their fiscal year in their quarter four. But obviously, I think they're anticipating a reduction in sales, given the fact they're releasing in February instead of November during the holiday season, Black Friday, all of that stuff. They also said this. Additionally, despite solid ratings, Metacritic 76, and user scores across the first-party and Epic stores, 3.9 out of 5, that reflect an immersive and authentic Star Wars universe, Star Wars Outlaws initial sales proved softer than expected. I would say that these sales are absolutely abysmal. They are catastrophic. This is not good whatsoever. CEO Yves Guillemot also said this. Our second quarter performance fell short of our expectations, prompting us to address this swiftly and firmly with an even greater focus on a player-centric gameplay-first approach and an unwavering commitment to the long-term value of our brands. It was so bad, he announced that the board of directors launched an internal review of the company. Beyond the first important short-term actions undertaken, the executive committee, under the supervision of the board of directors, is launching a review aimed at further improving our execution, notably in this player-centric approach and accelerating our strategic path towards a higher-performing model to the benefit of our stakeholders and shareholders. You would think that a business that is supposed to be selling games to gamers would have a player-centric approach already. The fact that they are saying that they don't have that, I think, shows just how in dire straits this company really is, that they've gotten away from trying to have a player-centric approach to selling games. I mean, what an absolute disaster. I mean, just the entire management, executive management, should be fired because they failed so abysmally. I mean, how do you get your company to this state where you're admitting that you no longer have a player-centric approach, and that is something that you're having to correct now? I mean, wow. Talk about arrogance. Talk about pride. And what do they say about pride? It always comes before the fall, and we are now witnessing the fall of Ubisoft right here, Star Wars Outlaws being a significant part of that. But again, this is just one piece of this. I've been talking about this now for I feel like a couple of months now. They've had a number of losses. The Avatar game, I think, probably was the first one. Skull and Bones, X Defiant, Star Wars Outlaws being the most recent one. Yeah, I mean, there's a new rumor out there that says that Skull and Bones cost them like $600 million. Woo! Over 10 years, whatever. Absolutely insane. And if you look at those Steam numbers for that game, not good whatsoever. They're clearly not recovering the costs for that game. Star Wars Outlaws, another game, looks like might be a loser, might not cover its costs either. The company did indicate it does hope to boost sales by polishing the game. They said this: in response to player feedback, Ubisoft's development teams are currently fully mobilized to swiftly implement a series of updates to polish and improve the player experience in order to engage a large audience during the holiday season to position Star Wars Outlaws as a strong long-term performer. I just don't think that is going to happen. I think people already understand what this game is, and they either purchased it or they did not. We'll see what happens because the game will get a release to Steam on November 21st. So we're going to see those Steam player counts. And again, usually you see them hit peak concurrent player counts within the first day or two, and then you kind of see that peak concurrent kind of trail off as time goes on. Those are the trends we have seen for games on Steam. Now, obviously, you can have games that will have longevity, maintain their player base over extended periods of time. Usually those are multiplayer games, such as like Counter-Strike 2, things like that. So Star Wars Outlaws is clearly not one of those games. So I expect its player count to be low to begin with, just because I don't think people are going to be buying this game. But I expect it to quickly fall off as well, even from where it is. Well, I think the real question is whether or not it will beat Concord. Will it have more? Will it have more players, concurrent players, than Concord? I would be remiss if I didn't point this out. You have to remember when Yves Guillemot answered that question that we talked about earlier from Nick Dempsey, he admitted that this game had the biggest marketing budget Ubisoft had ever given a game. That's right. It had the biggest marketing budget ever, only got to 1 million units. That's how big this is. That biggest marketing budget did absolutely nothing to move units of this game. All of those trips to Disneyland for those influencers did not move the needle whatsoever. They basically just threw away money. They basically gave these people free vacations and didn't get any kind of return for their investment. Because this is what he said. This is what Yves Guillemot said. He says, what we have factored in is a strong launch for Star Wars Outlaws that reflects the fact that it is among the most awaited games of the industry this year and a really strong positive community sentiment. I mean, these people were really sniffing their own farts. They thought they had something here, but people were telling them, no, you don't. What are you doing? This does not look good. What is happening here? Why did you create a bounty hunter game or a smuggler game with a woman? What is happening? What are you doing here? And why is she dressed like Han Solo? Why didn't you just make a Han Solo game? What's happening here? Nevertheless, he went on and said, and also the fact that we are coming with the biggest marketing campaign ever so far for an Ubisoft game. So that's what we've been factoring in the second quarter. So there you go. He said they had the biggest marketing campaign ever. And what it ended up doing, 1 million units. Holy smokes. This game is an absolute disaster for Ubisoft. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, but to always speak the truth.